Welcome to Issues and Answers with Diane Kinderwater. Issues and Answers is presented as a public service to New Mexicans by State Employees Credit Union, who have been proudly serving the families of New Mexico locally and abroad since 1958. State Employees Credit Union is ready to help you and your family with all your financial goals. And now, Issues and Answers with Diane Kinderwater.
Welcome to the program. I'm Diane Kinderwater. If you like to write or you love to read, you'll love the Corrales Writing Group. We're going to talk about this organization, which was based originally with writers from the Corrales area, Corrales, New Mexico, of course, our bedroom community right out of Albuquerque. It's a limited number who are involved because they're very prolific writers. They're very serious writers. I told her to have a lot of fun. But on the show today, we're going to talk about the books that they've written in collaboration, and we're going to share with you their kind of critiquing process. So if you're a writer, you can maybe answer some of these questions that they go through at their meetings. So please stay with us as we discuss the Corrales Writing Group and their critiquing process and what it can mean for you and your writing. We'll be back right after this. The newest publication from the Corrales Writing Group is Kale. Is a four-letter word. It sure is there, Chris Allen. You're proud of this. Ooh. Thank you for being a part of the program. Sure. You're a member of the Corrales Writing Group, and of course, Joe Brown, a member of the Corrales
Yes, I am.
Group, and so much more. And I'm sure you're so much more too, because Chris, before you started your writing, not your prolific writing, you were a technical writer.
I was a technical
So you were a writer. You've been a writer a long time.
Yes, I was an archaeologist for many years, and I had to write technical reports for clients. And it's very different from creative writing. I had to learn how to segue into creative writing.
But you love to write.
I do.
Oh my gosh. I mean,
I
that's
do.
a lot, the technical, and then you moved into the creative writing.
Yes, yeah.
Can't put down that computer keyboard, right?
Too many stories. I also have horses, and when I ride my horses, I get ideas for stories, and I just have to write them down then.
Fantastic. How about you, Joe?
Well, like her, I wrote before. I was a journalist as a youth. In my youth, I spent a year as a sports writer before I went back to school to finish my education in engineering. And then, of course, at Edwards Air Force Base, where I was for a number of years, we had test reports and various kind of technical papers, and I authored quite a few, or sometimes I edited quite a few. So we kind of come from similar backgrounds that way. We had to learn how to develop a story.
And you, again, still love to write.
Love to write.
Chris, you have a number of books from the Corrales Writing Group that you can tell us about, that you've produced over the past few years. But reading about your organization, your group, which is relatively small, you've come up with a very nice critique process that maybe our viewers who are beginning to write might be able to enjoy and appreciate. I know you're kind of limited to a relatively small group.
Right.
But that's just because you can really roll up your sleeves at your meeting and get into the critiquing is a big part of it. So let's start with you and coming up. What's the best thing to do with people who want to start writing? Coming up with the idea, or they have the idea in them, but getting it down on paper. What's your best suggestion on how to start?
Start. That's really the best thing to do, is just starting putting words to paper and at least get a first draft out, and then you can go back and see how you need to change it to make it a truly interesting story. The difference between technical writing and creative writing is in technical writing you're telling everybody what's happening. In my case, it was the Kiva is located 6 meters from the corner of the Pueblo. But in creative writing, you don't want to tell people what's happening. You want to show them what's happening. You want to engage the reader. You want them to feel what the characters are feeling, see what the characters are seeing, smell what the characters are smelling. So it took a long time for me to do that transition. And often when I first started in the critique group, the refrain I heard over and over again was, show, don't tell, show, don't tell. So that's one of the challenges. Let's see. Okay, so she's in the kitchen cooking onions. Okay, that's telling somebody what she's doing. But her eyes started to tear as she sliced the very pungent yellow onion she just purchased from the grower's market. Okay, I'm coming this off the top of my head, but yeah, but that's a difference between just telling somebody she's cutting an onion and making them feel what it's like for her to be standing there cutting the onion.
And that was the biggest critique. Do you recall yours, the same change? Do you feel the same way about creative? It's more showing,
absolutely.
guiding than...
I absolutely feel that way. And one of the things that I learned early on was 6 feet from the corner, the kiva. I would then say, that's an important thing, but I don't want to tell them. So I create a dialogue between an archaeologist and maybe a technician or something. And in the course of the subject, it comes up that the kiva is 6 feet from the corner. And that way it evolves out of a story as opposed to just the play-by-play of the ball game is the pass. In other words, you went away from telling to actually sharing the storyline.
Feeling. Joe was here before with the Southwest Writers Guild, and I appreciate that. And I told them during this COVID time, many of us are beginning to have more time perhaps to read, which I have been doing more reading, not writing, because he told me the step is to write down. But but the more that I'm reading, I'm saying, I can't do this. It's just, I'm reading it thinking how I would write, and wow, it's a lot of work.
There's so many different styles out there, though, and most people can find a style that's comfortable for them.
The description and the feeling and getting all that. I'm the one saying the kiva is 6 feet from the corner.
Right.
Efficient, get to it. But
yeah. It's a technique that you have to learn, which is what we both did.
But you love
being
absolutely. Able to do it. Yes. Regarding your meetings and your critique, I enjoy it, again, for those who want to write. And I thought it was interesting, you usually go through 5 or actually 6 different questions after someone submits a piece for review.
Yes.
And the first one, after they read, is 5 prompts. Just the easy thing is at least write 2 things that are working well, because I understand you want to start out with a positive. Because I've been critiquing things and I didn't start out with a positive. And when you don't, people just think of, the negative. They can't get that out of their mind, right?
Right.
I've learned that badly.
Absolutely. We want to encourage people to write. We don't want to discourage them. So, we start off right away saying what it is in the story that's working, what really appealed to us, what we liked.
And typically, in the segue from that, you can say, but.
Where are we waiting for the but? But no, before we go to the but, Joe, tell me about the 2 things that work well. How do you, again, we're doing that, I see, in a nurturing, encouraging way, I understand.
Right.
Yes.
Well, I typically look for, is the story moving along? And so I look for ways that I can show encouragement there. Hey, that character's developed better now. I'm beginning to see that person that I think you saw all along. Now I'm seeing it. Great job.
That's one,
something like
that.
Okay. And the other is the storyline. If the story is flowing and I can say something along the lines of, hey, your story is moving along very nicely. Now, had you thought about... And that's the segue.
Great. Chris, those 2 points, usually what do you look for as an encouraging part to let people know 2 things that are working well? Usually what do you tend to look for in the initial critique?
I find that things just pop out of the stories. Joe is working on a book right now, and he's developed a very interesting woman character who is from 1918. Right, 17, 18, that time period, right, in early 1920. And she is a very strong, dynamic businesswoman, but she also has maintained her femininity. And I just find that, and her sexuality. And I find that she's a very intriguing character to follow. So I've complimented Jo quite a few times on that.
On developing that particular character.
Yes.
And in other people's writing, what do you tend to look for in the beginning? The storyline, the characters, anything in particular?
I tend to look at it pretty holistically. The most important thing for me is, am I taken out of the story at any point? So as long as I'm reading the story and I'm engaged with the plot, I'm engaged with the characters, then that's a good story. But as you'll see from our second question,
identify places where, I'm sure there's a lot of places to critique, places where you're not sure what is happening. They might,
correct.
I imagine that they might put extra other things in there that they really don't need to develop the story of the character. Is that what we're looking at sometimes?
Sometimes. It could be as simple as a story I just submitted for critiquing. I have a character doing an action on one day, and then I immediately go into the following day, but I wasn't clear in that transition. And so the critique I got back from several of the members was, what was not working? It took me a minute to realize we were on the following day.
Sorry, Chris, that seems really easy to
It was easy to fix, but as a writer, I didn't see it.
And
that's why
I'm
you
kind of
need,
surprised at that too.
That's why you need other eyes on your work, because you know exactly what you're trying to say. You know what your characters look like, you know how they feel. The question is, have you conveyed that to a reader?
How about you, Jo? Finding places where you're not sure what's happening.
Something similar I could talk about, but what I want to emphasize here is that we don't hammer it hard. I'll give you an example of something that continues to surprise me. I'm newer at writing. I think I established that in December when I was here last. But this past weekend, Southwest Writers had David Morrell, the author of Rambo First Blood and all of that. Phenomenal writer. Been writing for 40-some years, successfully. And he shared with us that he's in his 8th draft of his current novel. Someone that gifted does have things that aren't working.
Right.
And we, as a group, try, because she's right, an extra set of eyes, an extra brain in operation is critical. And so we do look for things like, is the story, how'd you get to that point? That's not part of the previous scene, you know. There's things like that.
Sorry, I'm a little discouraged now. 8 drafts out of talented writers. That's a lot. That's a lot.
It's part of the business, though.
But it's part of it. And sometimes we need someone like a David Morrell to remind us that you're going to lose people.
Identify things that are repeating.
Yeah, I can give you a very simple example about that. I wrote about a Thanksgiving where my daughter's prospective in-laws attended. This was a few years ago. And just about everything that could go wrong went wrong. And in my writing that story, I have a scene where I'm, again, slicing carrots or potatoes or something. And then about a page later, I'm back slicing the potatoes as if it was the first time. I never realized I described that twice. And so the critique group immediately picked up on that and said, you did this twice in this story, and so I was easy to fix.
Of course, it is Thanksgiving. We all love the carbs, and especially if we like the potatoes. That's what Thanksgiving is about.
Absolutely.
Tell us what you now. That's interesting to ask in your critique of other people's writing at the Corrales Writing Group. Tell what you think the story is about. Of course, they know. Don't you need that, Chris? Wait, don't you need that first to know what your story is about before you start writing, or not?
What's interesting in those two questions, the first question is, what is the story about? And the second question is, what do you think the story is about? Usually those are the same thing. But once in a while, somebody will write a piece that appears to be, let's say, about a husband and wife breaking up and divorcing. But what it's really about is the effect that the alcoholic parents of the husband had on his relationship with his wife. And sometimes when you see those differences, the author may not have even seen those.
But you think they would?
Not always. When you're writing, you're very focused on getting your words down on paper and creating the scenes and creating the characters. And sometimes you've created a subtext that you don't even realize you've done.
And that's what I guess my kind of question, and I've learned the most important thing is to just start writing.
Yes.
But to me, as a non-writer, I write press releases and things like that, but as a non-writer of a novel, don't you first need to know what the story is to even start writing? Shouldn't you know what the story, even the ending is before you start writing?
Go ahead.
The novel she mentioned a while ago, that I've got this novel that I'm doing, I had in mind the beginning and the end.
Yeah.
Okay?
Right.
What I found out was that to get from the beginning to the end, there's at least a dozen stories in there.
Sure.
And if I fleshed them out, they might be 3 or 4 novels in what I thought was going to be one. And you just get started and the story just begins to flow. And even in something, this could even happen in a short story. You think you know what you're going to do.
You think, right?
And I won an award recently for something called Hey Coach. Now it turned out to be something good and I'm really happy with it. But during the process, I thought I was going to just talk about a great experience of a coach. In the process, it was really a story about the relationship between a coach and a particular football player. And so even though that's still somewhat the same, the emphasis went from just an experience of a coach to a specific experience of a coach. And it made it such a much better story. And I didn't see that necessarily when I started.
But a lot of stories seem to be, and I'm thinking, why didn't you see that? Most are relationships, right? I'm kidding, I'm joking.
No.
But you're probably also familiar with the term plotters versus pantsers. And there tend to be 2 different types of writers. The plotters are the ones who think ahead and write out outlines and have note cards. I think Michael Crichton was one of those. I read once that his living room floor would be filled with 5x9 or whatever cards of his plots. And then there are others of us, like me, who are pantsers. We are literally writing by the seat of our pants.
Really?
So it can be very fluid. It can be, It's just interesting.
And I'm a mixture. I have an idea what I want to do, but then I don't try to inhibit anything along the way.
Sure. Back to the pantsers. But still you need to have a core idea.
Sure.
Of what you want to get across?
Sure. Usually you have some creative idea that's come into your head, and now how do you make that into a story? Yeah.
Do all the stories, to carry the reader through, do they always just have to be like mystery, or I know developing a relationship between people carries you through, but to be a page turner, does it have to always kind of be like a mystery to keep you going, to find out what's going to happen?
I think you find that in many stories, whether it's memoir or science fiction or horror or mystery or biography, there are going to be unexpected twists and turns that are going to capture your attention. So not necessarily mystery per se, but a growth in a character can be very fascinating for people to watch as it unfolds across a page.
Yeah. How many short stories, books, things and contributions have you done, Chris Allen?
I'm not sure I could categorize them. I have, since joining the group, I've probably published, I don't know, maybe 20 stories.
Really?
Yeah, both in our anthologies and in independent publications. And I'm co-writing a book with my husband right now, a science fiction piece, and I'm co-writing a book with another one of our Corrales Writing Group members, Pat Walkow, which is a romance mystery.
See, there's the mystery. That's what I find. And the little that I'm reading, they all seem to kind of be mysteries to keep you going. But I mean, I don't choose them for that reason, but it just seems like every single book I've read recently is like, keeps me going though, because it seems to be like a twist at the end. Twist throughout it. So that's quite a lot of writing. How many hours a day do you spend writing?
Oh, it's probably easier to categorize by the week. I probably spend 20 to 30 hours a week doing writing. Because I raise sheep and goats, and I have a fiber business, and so there's a lot of other things that I do, so I have to squeeze the writing in when I can.
Is it, or when you feel like it, don't you have to be in the mood to write?
To some extent, yeah. And sometimes, as of last night, it was 3:30 in the morning, and I woke up with an idea, and I went off to the computer to write down some of the notes before I forgot it.
I imagine. So you must be tired. Is there a certain time of day or time? Do you try? Some people, maybe Michael Crichton does this, say, I'm going to write 3 hours a day.
Yep.
Or some people just when they have the feeling.
Well, I actually am more structured. And for me to be as effective as I need to be, you got to understand your own personality and what works for you. There is not a right or wrong way to do this, but I typically am better in the morning, but I have found that there's exceptions. I have found myself at 4 in the afternoon, and I started at 9, and I go, God, but I got to do this. And at 7 or 8 o'clock that night, I quit. But I would have to say that somewhere around 20 to 30 hours a week is probably pretty close to what I do as well.
Wow, like a full-time job, you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. What genres do you write, Chris Allen?
I've written horror, mystery, romance, science fiction, memoir. I think that's a lot of them.
Do you think all the stories are out? I mean, so many people have written books. Are there any new stories, other than memoirs, which are your own, are there new ideas out there to write? Or have they all been written?
There are archetypes that are standard and have been since storytelling began. So you have the hero's quest. You have the buddy theme, which would be, Mel Gibson and Danny Glover movies.
The underdog.
You have the underdog. You have the superhero. I mean, you have a number of genres that most stories will fall into. And it's very hard to break out of those genres. Most of the time when you write, you're going to fall into one of those time-tested and true genres. But there's a phrase in Hollywood which is, give me the same thing, only different. So your challenge is to write within those themes and come up with the unique twist that's going to grab somebody's attention.
Exactly.
That is a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you do that? How do you do that, Chris?
I don't know. I mean, the story that my husband and I are working on is about a young alien who comes to protect a young musician in Ireland because the product he produces is something that's has universal appeal, and there are other groups that want to take this talent from him. And so she comes to protect him, but that sounds
pretty darn unique. That sounds pretty creative there.
No, again, it's a hero's journey. It's going to be a story about how she, the alien who's female, and the man she's trying to protect, how they both grow through this interaction. So, yeah, the story's been written before, but hopefully we'll put a little unique spin on it.
Great, thank you for that.
I was just going to say that my novels that I'm working on right now would fall into the category of historical fiction. And when you're dealing in historical fiction, in your story, you can bleed over into a little bit of mystery or a little bit of this or a little bit of that. I mean, you can interweave some of those things, like there's definitely romance in mine. There's I wouldn't say eroticism, but It's probably rated R in a few places. And I love that flexibility that I have. Now, historical fiction means you need to be reasonably careful that what you're putting in there happened back then or could have, but it is fun because there is going to be a little bit of the hero kind of thing in it as well, and so forth. But I don't want for a potential writer to feel like they have to find the thing. Chris mentioned that she's written in multiple different genres, and like right now I feel like I have the flexibility that I can weave in and out of genres. And so I don't want anyone that would be considering writing a story that's been in the back of their head for the last decade, for them to think they got to figure out, okay, what am I going to be writing? Just write it. It'll all be where it needs to be in the end.
Chris Allen with the Corrales Writing Group, what would you like to share in the final minute that we have with the viewers about writing, about your story?
Well, I think we write to engage people, I particularly like writing humor. And our latest book, Kale is a Four-Letter Word, is a collection of stories about the vegetable kale. And whether you love kale or hate kale, you'll find something of interest in there. We have science fiction, we have a little mystery, we have a horror story.
All in this book?
All in that book,
how about
right.
kale?
And
Didn't know it was so interesting.
Well, we've really turned kale on its ear, that's for sure. But it's especially important right now when we're all stressed out with a pandemic and we've had a turbulent political year. If we can give somebody a few minutes to sit down with a book and have them laugh, have them think about something other than what's happening in their lives, then we'll have achieved our goal.
And where can they find these books from the Corrales Writing Group?
They're available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, also Walmart online, Target online, and you can contact any one of our members.
Can you Google the Corrales Writing Group and come up with something?
Yes, we have a Facebook page. Yes.
So that's the easiest thing to do. Find out where you can buy books from the Corrales Writing Group by Googling it. That's easy. Thank you, Chris. Chris Allen, Joe Brown, appreciate you for being a part of the program.
Thank
you. Right
you.
on. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Issues and Answers with Diane Kinderwater is presented as a public service to New Mexicans by State Employees Credit Union, which has proudly been serving the families in New Mexico locally and abroad since 1958. State Employees Credit Union is ready to help you and your family with all your financial goals and is the exclusive sponsor of Issues and Answers with Diane Kinderwater in order to inform, educate, and better the lives of New Mexicans. To comment on today's program or to purchase a DVD copy of any Issues and Answers program, visit sunbroadcasting.org or call us at 505-345-1991.